I've got another one. How I would redesign the fighter. The fighter is a funny idea because it's not as a class concept, as a class notion. It's a little bit different than the others because the rogue is sneaky and implies a sort of independence. The barbarian is uncivilized and has implications of like a background in a sort of more rudimentary society, sort of tribal, primal kind of upbringing. A lot of classes have this sort of implication of the kinds of societies that produce these characters, the kinds of characters that are these classes. The fighter is weird because the entirety of the class is based on you fight with weapons. That's what you do. And that's such a really vague, generic idea. It's one of the things that I kind of ran into when I was writing Legends and Lore is that I try to do some combat abilities and non-combat abilities for every class. But how do you do non-combat abilities for a class called the fighter? Literally in the name, it fights. That's what it does. So you have to sort of take some liberties with what we are assuming the fighter is like. You are an armored warrior of some sort. You have lots of different weapons, but more broadly, you are a strength-based physical combat kind of go-getter, frontliner, very self-initiating kind of character. So if I were to redesign the fighter, here's what I would do. I always say that you can't fix martials in 5th edition, period. No, you can't fix martials in 5th edition without giving them maneuvers. Any fix that doesn't involve the creation of one or more maneuver systems is just doomed to mediocrity. It's not going to work, and it's not going to accomplish what needs to be accomplished to really fix the class disparities. So, what would I do with the fighter? Well, as it happens, I have some experience with rewriting the fighter. Like with the barbarian, I am actually working on a fighter rework presently. I have it. I have like the framework, the general form of the class done and ready to go. Is it going to be done by the time this video comes out? No, it's not. But it will be at some point. And I'll put it out there and people will tell me how broken it is because it's stronger than the king of F tier. Reddit. So, here's what I do. I have a system of, here's actually some background of how this started. I started building this class as a sort of sarcasm project. What I was wanting to do was sort of, I was reskinning a caster using the spell points variant from the Dungeon Master's Guide and sort of reframing spells as maneuvers. And so the idea was I would give them fewer spells than casters have. I will give them, I like everything about it is going to be no more powerful than what a caster gets. So like that is the ceiling. A lot of it would actually be nerfed individually. Like all this stuff gets nerfed. I gave them fewer spell points than a caster gets. And what ended up happening was that it was close enough to like a real class idea that I just kind of went, whatever, I'll make it a real class. Like this is no longer a statement about class design. Because the idea was that I would get it all done and together and put it out there and people would tell me how busted it is. I'd be like, that's a caster. You are saying that a caster is busted. This is everything about a caster, but way more limited. A tiny fraction of the options that are nerfed. And you're saying it's too strong because it is stronger than a fighter. That was the original idea. It is no longer that. But I did keep some of the ideas. So you have a pool of points. I call it stamina. You spend stamina to perform exploits. Exploits are the name of your type of maneuver. You also have katas, which are exploits that don't take up any stamina. They are your cantrip equivalents. I kind of figured I would do 5 levels of exploits, roughly corresponding to up to level 5 spells. Because I kind of think that past that point, it starts devolving into issues that like break the campaign. High level spells are not good for the health of a long-term campaign. So my maneuvers are not going to go that high. You'll get other things instead. What that looks like, I don't know. I just don't know. I have not developed that far yet. But in the meantime, the fighter scales like cantrips at 5, 11, and 17. I've talked about this before. All classes should scale either at those levels or have its own sort of scaling to sort of keep up with that. The barbarian, I've already mentioned, I didn't do that. But instead of getting extra attacks, I called the ability extra oomph. I'm looking for another word that kind of communicates the same thing because it's a little awkward looking. But yeah, extra oomph, which is whenever you hit with a weapon attack, you do additional weapon dice based on how many times you've scaled up. So it is just like a cantrip where you're doing a single attack, but the damage scales up. Why did I do this change? Well, because making a lot of attacks is not that much different than doing a single attack that does more damage. Though actually your regular attack damage has gone down because you're not adding your modifier multiple times, just the weapon dice multiple times. So this does a few things. One, your opportunity attacks are much stronger because more of your turns, more of like a full turn of damage is now compressed into a single attack. That attack, it's a weapon attack when you hit with an opportunity attack, so you're going to be doing a lot more damage with that. Your opportunity attacks are a lot more dangerous. I'll get into that some more too. 2, readied actions are not penalized. 3, the value of the power attack feats, Sharpshooter and Great Weapon Master, severely reduced because you are no longer able to get the plus 10 damage on multiple attacks. Severely reduced. Also, your base damage has gone up, and power attack abilities are less valuable the higher your base damage is. It also kind of avoids the problem of like what am I looking for? It avoids the problem of like static bonuses being too valuable because you have to multiply it by the number of attacks you get. That's just not an issue because you only get the one attack. So you only apply them once. It's very easy to understand the value. So here is actually, it's not only easier to understand the value of those things, it is consistent across all levels. A level 1 fighter getting a +2 to damage, the same amount of extra damage as a level 20 fighter getting +2 damage because you're still only doing it once. So it has flattened that math quite a bit. That's why I did that. I also gave it, I've redone all of the fighting styles. The defense fighting style now scales with level. At certain levels, it actually goes up if you're wearing heavier and heavier armor. Up to a maximum of +3, because the fighter should have a reason to take levels in fighter instead of just going off into wizard, and B, should have higher AC than other classes aside from maybe the paladin. Like the paladin and the fighter should have the highest AC in the game, right? I think that's a pretty uncontroversial take. So I've redone all the fighting styles, especially so that archery is no longer the automatic best fighting style. Most exploits, here's the thing. So between 2/3 and 3/4 of exploits are melee only. You do have some ranged exploits, so the fighter can still operate at range. And here's a thing. A lot of people try to tell me that the fighter needs to be just as good at range as they are in melee. I fully disagree. I don't think there's any compelling reason. There's no really independently justifiable reason for that to be true. It could be true, like if that's the way your game is designed, that your class named fighter is equally good at ranged as they are at melee. Sure, why not? But it doesn't have to be. And this fighter is not. This fighter is definitely geared for melee. you can build a ranged fighter. It's important to me that you can build a ranged fighter, a ranged specialized fighter, but your options there are going to be much more limited. It's going to be a much more narrow focus for the character. If you want a lot of versatility, and frankly, if you want to be stronger, you're going to be a melee character for a number of reasons. One, it's the core fantasy of the fighter, and two, melee should be stronger than ranged because it is a more dangerous position to be in. It's harder to arrange your positioning such that you are able to attack, and also it's more dangerous because more enemies are able to hurt you when you're in melee. So, yeah. So we're really leaning into the melee thing. And I have taken the stamina scales from I think you get it 2 points at level 2, all the way up to 35 at level 20. It's some scale like that. That's about how it goes. And then exploits, I use the math from Psionic Powers in 3rd edition, where a level 1 ability costs 1, and then it's +2 for every level above that. So it goes 1, 3, 5, 7, and 9, I think is where it would cap out. Because that would be level 5. You get a certain number that you can prepare each day. You don't have a list known. You prepare from the entire list of exploits. So the fighter can sort of prepare like a cleric does at the beginning of each day. So the idea is that you are kind of spending daily resources like a caster, though I do have a short rest recovery ability in there. It's kind of limited, so the majority of your stamina is available at the beginning of the day. It's summer where I'm at. It's summer's really kicking in, so I'm going to keep these videos a little bit shorter because if I have the AC on, you can hear it, and I don't like that. So I'm running without AC right now. It's really hot. What else is important to the fighter rework? It is important to me that the fighter is able to keep up. It's important to me that all marshals are able to keep up with the casters. So that is key number one. That's why I go into these maneuvers. I also invented stances, which is you generally, it's a bonus action to go into a stance. You get an effect right when you enter the stance, and then the stance lasts for either 1 minute or until you use a different stance or until you are incapacitated. It's kind of your equivalent of concentration. Any exploit with a duration that affects yourself is going to be a stance. And so I have what I call a fire soul stance, where every time you attack, if you hit and don't crit, it stacks up 1, and for every stack, it expands your crit range. And then once you crit, it resets down to just a nat 20. And then it builds back up again. I think that's really cool, right? Because people have expressed that they like crit fishing builds. So this, you don't have to build for it. It just happens. You take that one exploit, you go into that stance at the start of the battle, and now you're crit fishing. You just want to make a bunch of attacks. Boom, 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 you're going to crit. Anyways, the idea is that the exploits are going to encourage and support daring plays. You're going forward and you're going to get into melee, you're going to tangle with the enemy, and you're going to be dangerous and survivable. Unlike with the barbarian, the fighter isn't necessarily all about taking the hits. They may be about taking the attacks, but not necessarily about taking the hits. They don't really want to be hit. They don't have any benefit for taking damage. So you're going to have a lot of defensive abilities. I gave them a shield equivalent, which works kind of like shield, except you can use it on yourself or an ally within your reach. And it gives +2 to AC or +4 if you are wielding a shield. And that's the other thing, is that a lot of exploits have little bolded annotations for if you're wielding a shield, or if you're wielding a spear, or if you're wielding a blade. And I'm going to be identifying, what weapons go into which categories. I'm reinventing weapon categories from 4th edition, big surprise. And you get extra benefits based on that, because I think that's a really cool idea. In 4th edition, the fighter didn't really have subclasses in the same way that other classes did, but instead it got benefits based on what kind of weapon it's using. Because I do like the idea of a fighter that pulls out weapons as needed for a situation, but in this case, you're not using it, you're not just swapping and cycling through weapons every turn to get whatever benefits they are that you can only do once per turn. Instead, you're going to know what power you want to use and what weapon best works with that power. And so you are going to, drop your spear, pull out your sword, charge in, do a thing that's really good with swords. And then on your next turn, you're going to hop back, pick up your spear, and do a thing that's really good with spears. Because you're doing things that are unique and evocative to the weapons fantasy, which I think is a cool way to go about doing fighter stuff, right? That stuff doesn't exist in 5th edition, and Weapon Mastery sure as hell don't do that. Weapon Mastery system is basically just get a golf bag full of weapons, cycle through them every turn for maximum number of attacks, and maximize your DPR. No, this is going to change your play style in a real, tangible way based on what weapons you have in your hands. Or change what weapons you have in your hands based on what play style you want to specialize in. So yeah, that's those are my thoughts on the fighter. That's how I redesign the fighter. That's how I am redesigning the fighter. The PDF is not going to be ready by the time this video goes live. It will be out at some point. I'm sure I'm gonna make a mention of it.